Batman Arkham Asylum is 15 years old, making it old enough to drive in most states. This game, and the series as a whole, is kind of considered the ultimate litmus test for superhero games, but while Asylum especially is a watershed moment in gaming history, it's also one that definitely shows its age in some spots. So, a few months removed from its 15th anniversary, my friend Landen and I thought that it would be fun to revisit the game and talk about how it's aged, our experience with it over time, and what makes it so unique even after a decade and a half. No, this is not a short video. Yes, I'm aware that I made this channel specifically for short videos. Hey look, is that a distraction? If you haven't seen our hour-long breakdown of the game on my main channel, I recommend you check that out after as well, and I hope you enjoy this kind of new format for a video. On to the conversation. How's it going, man? How are you feeling about the video?
Yeah, no, I'm doing good. Busy day at work. Tired, I slept wrong, and my neck is all weird. But other than that, the video, I'm really excited about it. It's coming out really great. Still have yet to finish it, and you still have yet to finish your end as well.
I've yet to start it, dude. Like, it's just a pile of unedited footage on my end.
My section isn't as nearly as long as yours, so kind of good on that end. Even though I have to edit this thing, but you know, it's whatever. But yeah, no, I'm doing just fine. I'm feeling good. Just been in a Batman mood lately. No thanks to you.
Yeah.
But more importantly, how are you doing? What's going on your end?
I'm doing good, man. I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit worried about getting this out on time, especially because I end the video with Happy Halloween, and if it's like November 3rd when it comes out, that's gonna seem really awkward. But I didn't expect this to be as big of a project when I first started it. The original plan was to do all 3 of the games. And then I was like, there's just so much with Arkham Asylum just by itself. And I was like, I guess I just gotta do a whole thing with that. And I got you on board. How is it like different from the stuff that you've done also on your channel?
It's very like different but similar in a lot of ways. It's different because it's like, I wouldn't have thought to really make a video about Arkham Asylum like on my own. I love these games dearly, but like the idea of like approaching what is essentially kind of like a comic book story and translating it into a video, that was not in my realm of thought, like at all. But at the same time, it's so similar in the sense to where like I think about my Red Dead video where I'm kind of storytelling in that one. Like I'm kind of like documenting the events that happened in like these like certain like mini stories. And this is kind of just like one big mini story that is like interspersed throughout the game. So different in the sense that like this is not subject matter I would usually cover, but similar in the sense that like this is my style, this is like right up my alley, and I think it fits my kind of editing style.
For sure. Also, did you notice I'm wearing an absolute Batman shirt?
Yes.
You didn't point it out, and I was like, I wonder if you're waiting until the video starts to point this out. Absolute tank of a Batman logo.
I noticed it, and then we ran into technical issues, and then I have my webcam just recording me, so I can't see you at all. It totally slipped my mind. Dude, that's a good Batman logo, though. Like, it's... Oh,
I really like it.
Something about the fat Batman logo that just, like, really... Like, I really like the Dark Knight Returns like Batman logo as well, and like that's what they did with the Zack Snyder Batman suit, which is a banger suit minus the headpiece. I love everything about that suit except for how the face looks. It's just
I feel like I like when the suits are slimmer. I like thinner suits. I don't like the absolute like bat tank suits. I think the one from the Batman, like the Matt Reeves one, is really sick. But the logo itself, like just and like he use it as like an axe in the comic or something. I saw something about that. He like detaches the logo and he uses it as an axe.
I like that practically for Batman because that is something that like he has like, you know, everything up his nook and cranny, you know, if you get what I'm saying. Like, he'll use absolutely everything, and that includes the logo on his chest, and like, I kind of like the scrappiness of that. God, yeah, it is like a really good suit, though. Batman looks like aesthetically better with like a cloth-like texture to him, I guess, which is kind of why I like the Batman v Superman suit. It's because it kind of just looks like he's just wearing straight Kevlar, you know? I mean, even the Arkham series is kind of guilty of like doing the super souped up tank suits, like like in Arkham Asylum you got the armored Batman suit, which is cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of like getting ahead of ourselves here in a sense, but like the one thing that really stuck out to me the first time I played Arkham Asylum was the lack of like, oh, there's no optional suits. You can't change your suit. You got to stick with the same suit, and it's
yeah.
That's like, that totally threw me off. This wasn't my first Arkham game, so it was like, it totally threw me off, and I was like disappointed by that. And then the only other suit you can change into is the armored Batman suit just for the trial levels. You can't even wear it in the main story. Just very interesting and very strange.
Yeah, I didn't even clock the fact that you can change your suit in this game. That now that you mention it, I'm like, I don't know how I didn't pick up on that. But I kind of like it, like, because it's like so linear, because it's so structured, and it's like they just had like a singular vision. Even though, and we'll talk about this later, even though there are like character designs that I'm not the most fond of, it's definitely like I like that they just like stuck with it. I love the Spider-Man games. I love like playing around with the suits in the Spider-Man game, but sometimes I just like playing it with that original suit. It's a nice suit too.
It is a very nice suit, and they did a really nice job with the suit in this game as well. Like, it's just kind of like a really awesome rendition of, like, I guess a modern Batman suit with the underpants outside and all. Like, it's he's still intimidating, you know, he's still scary and like beefed up. Of the designs in this game, the bat suit for sure is like top tier in my opinion.
I think first we should also set the scene a little bit. We kind of jumped right into talking about like the bat suit. Let's talk about like what is Arkham Asylum, why is it important, why are we even talking about it 15 years later?
Yeah, so Batman Arkham Asylum, released in 2009, is a seminal piece of Batman fiction that like truly immersed fans into the world of the Dark Knight. The animated characters, the innovative gameplay, and the haunting atmosphere like offered a linear Batman experience like no other, like truly letting players don the cowl and just become the Bat. And it's kind of like a joke now. It's like, this game really makes you feel like Spider-Man. It really makes you feel like Batman. But it's like, dude, at the time, it's like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, we've been waiting for something like this. But Arkham Asylum is more than just a great Batman game. It's like one of the most important video games ever released, because it was like a licensed video game that was just more than like a movie tie-in. You know, it was a fully fleshed out universe, like comparable to the TV shows, the movies, and the comics. Arkham Asylum came out when the Nolan Batman movies were coming out, and it's such a stark difference in like the take of Batman. You know, like in the Nolan movies, you got a grounded, realistic Batman, and in this one, they're harkening back to like the kind of crazy comic book, like animated styling of Batman. So that's what Arkham Asylum is just this really wonderful pseudo Metroidvania kind of linear Batman experience in a time where, you know, movie tie-in games, they were cool, but they were kind of falling out of fashion.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like the animated stylings of the whole thing were probably a large part is because the writer for Arkham Asylum was Paul Dini, who worked on like the animated stuff, and I think he's the original creator of Harley Quinn. So it's pretty interesting, and people have talked about like how Night feels different because he's not on Night. But I think like having him on was like a really, really great idea, and it gave the game like a much different identity. Because initially they did want it to be more tied into what Nolan was doing with the movies, and then they just kind of went into a weirder, like more psychological horror direction. And I think that's great. Like the fact that we could have like two huge Batman stories at the same time that are like covering completely different sides of Batman. I think that's why he resonated so much with people, especially like our age growing up, and there are these two like extremely different iterations of him, and then you're watching like the animated stuff, and that's a little bit different. Like I think that has given him free reign to really like tell any kind of story through Batman. I feel like he has the least barriers for like what kind of story you can tell with this comic character.
It's really interesting looking at like the Arkham series trajectory in terms of like the direction that they go in. To where like Asylum feels like it's so, dude, it feels like you're playing an episode of the animated series. And then, you know, City is very animated in itself too. Kind of takes on a little bit more of like a grounded nature, and then Asylum goes full on like, it's not realistic, but it's definitely not as animated, and it's definitely spookier and like more grounded in a sense as well. And so Arkham Asylum is very special in that sense, because it's like they could have just made a tie-in game, but they didn't, and it worked, and it paid off, and it's so much better off for it. You know, what was your first introduction into the Arkham games? I know for me, Arkham Asylum was my first introduction, but it wasn't because I had a copy at home. I was at GameStop, when they still had the like the TV and like the
like the demos and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they had a booth for Arkham Asylum, and it was the first scene where, like, you know, Joker lets loose, and then like the goons start attacking you. And I was so young, and I just could not fathom the combat. I was like getting frustrated at this game I didn't own, but I still thought it was cool, and I was like, I really like this. And with that, it always kind of lingered in my mind. I'm like, oh, so like there's a really cool Batman game that's just out there that I haven't played yet. But then time went on. City came out. I totally missed it. But Arkham Knight was when I first like actually sat down and played a Batman game for the first time, and it was hard going back for me. You know, like Arkham Knight was just so good. You know, like, being a dumbass little kid, I'm like, graphics are everything. Look at the rain. Look how good this game looks, and look how dog shit Arkham Asylum looks. And it's like, it was so hard for me to go back to these older games. But then, like, I grew up, obviously, and I was like, oh, I can appreciate these for what they were at the time, and they are wonderful, wonderful games. But that's me though. Like what was your first Batman game? Like, where did you stand with the series at when you were a kid?
I think honestly, like, surprisingly, a bit of a similar story. I'll also say that, like, going back to Arkham Asylum is always difficult because, like, when you look at everything in terms of fidelity and then also, you know, character design and just like the atmosphere of that game and the rain and all of that, it's so technologically advanced for when it came out that it could come out like today and people would be pretty happy with it. I feel like it's like it was so ahead of its time. And so to go back to Asylum, because I had a very similar thing, right, where I didn't play it at a demo at GameStop, but I played it at my cousin's house. And this was when I was like 12, 13, I think. And I went over to his house, and I'd only ever owned like a Wii. I didn't think games were like whole like stories and like you had to like actually do anything complex. Like, to me, it was like a bunch of game shows and like Wii Sports. Like, that's what games were to me. I played Uncharted 3, and I like couldn't get out of the like underground train level at the very beginning where they're like trying to sneak through and you have to find just like an exit. I just couldn't figure it out, so I did that for like 3 hours. And then my cousin also had Arkham, like all of the, like both the Arkham games, I guess, at that point. I remember he game shared me back when like you could just game share your entire list of games to anyone else on PlayStation. He game shared all of it to me, so I had them, but I never played them. And then Knight came out, and then same thing happened to me. I got so hooked on Arkham Knight, and it was my first platinum ever. I love Arkham Knight to death. That is like one of it's I think it's probably the game, like the single player game that I have the most playtime in. And yeah, it was the same thing of like going back to Arkham Asylum. I was like, oh, this is fun, this is cool. I was like in it for the story, but I don't think I appreciated it for what it was because I just had that like introduction to Knight and like how smooth it felt to play and everything. I played it through the first time and it was okay. But I always, like, people who said like Arkham Asylum is the best game, I just never like vibed. I was like, I don't know, man, like Knight's so fun. And then like when I played City, I was like, I feel like this is a good intersection between, you know, it's old and like it doesn't have like some of the problems that Knight has with like the boss fights and the Batmobile, which I actually kind of like, but that's a hot take. But it doesn't have like the same like gameplay issues that Asylum did. And so every time I replay, I would like try and get into Asylum for a couple hours, and I just wouldn't be able to. It feels like such a step down in the combat, which actually leads to like one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Now that we've gotten Arkham Knight, and then since then we've gotten the Spider-Man games, which aren't exactly the same thing, but they're a bit of an evolution of it. How do you feel like the combat has aged in Asylum? Would it have been a game that you would revisit of your, if we kind of thought of this video before we replayed the game, so if it wasn't for that, do you think you would have like replayed it and like really vibed with the combat and would have kept like going through it?
Yeah, so the combat in Arkham Asylum is like one of the most I guess influential things about the game. It's rough, don't get me wrong, like it's definitely, it leaves a lot to be desired, but it's the bones for like what would be great games moving forward, not only with just Arkham City, Origins, and Knight, but with Shadows of War and Shadows of Mordor, which is just straight up Lord of the Rings Batman. And then, of course, derivative of Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, which have a take on the Arkham combat style, which, I'll be entirely honest, kind of fits more with Spider-Man than it does Batman.
The combat system for Spider-Man is, I think, based a little bit more off of Spider-Man 2, like the tie-in game back, 2003-ish, when that game came out. But I feel like because this game popularized it so much, people assume that it's very inspired by this, which it is to a degree, but I think it's more originating from that.
The way they went about it was excellent, in my opinion. And it's not perfect in the first iteration, but it slowly and progressively becomes better and better. And by the time we get to Night, it is so goddamn good. I never played an Arkham game on hard before, so that was definitely a learning curve, was like actually having to pay attention to when they're like, getting ready to attack you. And some of the timing just doesn't work out, and like it's kind of, you have to commit to some of your attacks that you can't back out of. So if, like, say for instance, you hit someone, you knock them on the ground, the other guy is getting up right behind you, but you already committed to doing like a ground takedown, they're gonna get you from behind, and it's like, that's so frustrating. Why can't I just not, like, why can't I counter mid takedown and just, like, screw the takedown? But like, it has a sense of like commitment that like I kind of appreciate, that makes it more rewarding when you actually master the combat. So like by the time I was like at the end of the game, I was taking down these like hordes of these inmates, which, by the way, it will never not be funny. Batman, giving several brain hemorrhages and permanently injuring these lunatics, these guys that are legally, criminally insane.
Dude, he just grabs him and just slams him on the... It's ridiculous.
It is totally ridiculous. And by the way, what are they eating in that asylum, dude? Why are there gains? Like, so fucking... Dude, every single inmate is ripped. Yeah. Like, they're feeding them slop, and they're somehow, like... like Henry Cavill levels of, like, bodybuilder. And you're just roundhouse kicking them from like 30 yards away in a single room. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's so like fun and like immersive, and it's like, damn, I really am Batman. So it's like, I don't know. Arkham Asylum is rough around the edges with the combat, certainly, but it's still fun, and it's the bones for like a truly wonderful combat system that like has yet to be evolved, I guess, at this point in time.
Yeah, I think the lesson that they learned throughout the series is that, especially with the acrobatics of how because even in this one, when I was thinking back on it, I was like, I think Batman's slower in this one. He's not flying across the screen the way he does in Night. He still does. He does like triple backflips into a like roundhouse kick on a dude across the room. It's like so stupid. Like the disrespect he shows random ass people who are having their families threatened to be here.
Later in the game, when like Poison Ivy brainwashes the like guards, he is still ripping the same moves on them. It's like, this dude has a wife, probably like 2 kids, and he's just sitting there and he's like slamming on his nuts like really hard, and it's like, dude, you did not need to do that. You erased his memory. He got hit so hard on the head, he is now a different person.
Bro, it's so funny how like out of their way they go to explain that like these are just like regular ass people who are being brainwashed, and he just doesn't get... Like, I'm replaying Spider-Man 1, and there's a scene where the people at the party, who brainwashes them? Mr. Negative, I think, brainwashes all of them. And they start attacking him, and he like, he rolls them off him and like webs them up on the ground. He's like trying to be, except for one dude who he just like just slams his head into the ground. I was like, whoa. I know he's dressed as the Rhino, but that's just no place for that. But the issue with it is that besides a couple of gadgets here and there, it's like mainly 2 buttons. And people have always been like, oh, you can just sit there and you can press, like just wait to counter and press it. Like, yes, you can technically play this game with like one hand and like just do this. It's a complaint that makes sense, but also one that's like, yeah, but you're like making the game not fun on purpose. Like, you're pushing yourself to do that. But at the same time, like, because it forces you to be slower and more methodical because of the lack of animation canceling, you basically master it by slowing yourself down and doing things like super slow and methodically. And I feel like that isn't always the most fun. I think it just took me a little bit to get used to it, and then I was like, you know what, this is fine. Like, I'm not like, I don't dislike playing through like the combat sections.
And I feel like a lot of people who like criticize the game for that like only played like the first third of it, because they introduce enemies that you can't just punch or counter, you know, like you have to use like the cape to stun them. They evolve that, and it's like, yeah, you can boil it down to just like, you know, attack, counter, but at the same time, the point of the game is to get like a high combo as well. Like, if you strive for anything in this game, it's to do better than your previous combat encounter, and that means getting a better free flow combo and using those combos to get takedowns and using those combos to throw enemies, you know? It's like my main go-to was just like punch, wait for a counter, and then boom, I had enough to do a takedown. You take someone down, and it's you clean a room fast by just doing that. And there's you know, strategy to it as well. That's because it's like, oh, this guy has the electric baton, I want to take him out first because he's going to be more of a problem than this regular guy over here. Or this guy has a gun, I need to get rid of him ASAP. There's more to it than meets the eye. But yeah, I mean, it's like,
yeah,
you can kind of boil any game down to just, oh, you just press R2 to shoot, and it's like, no. it's a little dumb. Arkham Asylum also features some iconic voice actors who are known for their voice work in various cartoons. Of course, you have the legendary Kevin Conroy, may he rest in peace, who portrays Batman. He is the voice of Batman for everyone, and it's really hard to top him, but a lot of actors do a pretty good job of, you know, living up to the Batman name. Of course, you also have the Joker, played by everyone's favorite Mark Hamill, and me personally, there is a voice actor in this game who I kind of forgot about. He's like the forgotten voice of my childhood, and that's Tom Kane, who voices Jim Gordon, Quincy Sharp, and of course the like what we believe to be Amadeus Arkham. Tom Kane, for those who don't know, if you've seen the Star Wars, the Clone Wars, like the Powerpuff Girls or any of that, he has this like specific voice that like once you listen to it, you're like, oh yeah, it's that guy. He has such a wonderful voice, and it's like for him to be on this game is just really, I don't know, it just kind of tickles something in me. I don't know where I was going with that, but that's all right. Point being, what are some of your favorite performances in this game?
Yeah, I mean, like, Mark Hamill is Joker. If you had to pick a quintessential Joker, like, Heath Ledger's is great, but there are things about him that are so they're like Dark Knight more than they are the Joker. So if you had to pick, like, a version of Joker that just, like, embodied that character as well as possible, I think he's a great choice. I'll take this time. I know we're not talking about Arkham Origins. I really like Roger Craig Smith as Batman, and I really like Troy Baker as Joker. They both kill it. And I actually will say that as much as I like Kevin Conroy as Batman, I think I like when Batman can show like a little bit more emotion on the surface. Kevin Conroy's is always like, in every iteration of it, his voice is like his mask as well in a way. And so emotions don't really break through, and it's a really great like directing choice, and there's a reason that he's become like the Batman. Like, he is the version of the character that most people think of. But I kind of like when Batman like breaks a little bit, which Roger Craig Smith does a lot. And there's actually a scene in this game, I think it's when it's like the first Joker, or the first Scarecrow nightmare sequence, where he's calling Barbara Gordon after he thinks Jim Gordon's died. And you hear like a little bit of break in his voice, and I think that's like super, like, it stuck with me because you just don't hear that from this character much. Even when I think like in Night, when he thinks Barbara's dead, he sounds sad, but his voice isn't really breaking. So I thought that was like a nice little moment for his voice. I think a strange pick for me for like a voice actor that I really liked, even though I've seen like the Harley Quinn show, and like I love that show, it's great. But for some reason when I think of Harley Quinn's voice, I always think of this like really shrill, high-pitched, like, she's like very clearly like pantomiming for effect in this game, and like I like, there's something about it that really sticks with me. When I look at her in a comic book, I kind of think of her with this voice.
Yeah, no, the actress you're thinking of, Arlene Sorkin, she is the first voice of Harley Quinn. I mean, not like we stated before, she was introduced in the Batman animated series, and she kind of was like the voice of Harley for the longest time in like any movie, TV show, or video game. That was kind of the go-to. She actually unfortunately passed away in August of 2023. So yeah, another lost treasure within the wonderful cast of the Batman universe. She does a really great Harley.
Damn, that sucks. I didn't know that. What the hell?
I remember seeing that, and then I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah. I want to touch back to Kevin Conroy's kind of like stale performance of Batman. Not that like his performance is what's wrong with it. I think it's more to do with the writing. This version of Batman in the Arkham games is a very interesting and kind of like closed off rendition of Batman. In a way, he's kind of like the most Giga Chad Batman, like in any media I've ever seen. Like, his thighs are huge. Like, he is so buff and
he's a big
no
boy.
emotion. It's very like flat. It's also very fun. There's a line in Arkham Knight that always gets me, and he's like, "I'm proud of you, Dick." And it's is very serious.
It's the self-seriousness that gets me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that, because in many ways I think it kind of leans into him being like a video game portrayal of Batman, where he's like the quintessential kind of like power fantasy, but at the same time, yeah, he's a little boring and like walled off at the same time, and it's very I don't know how to feel about it. All I know is that I really love playing as him, and he definitely is boring without, the likes of Mark Hamill. They're like peanut butter and jelly together. Just those two really complement each other really well. Batman wouldn't be anything without his rogues gallery, honestly.
I think that the portrayal would have been like perfect if they just got him to break a little bit more. Like, I really liked that like little piece of emotion he showed when, things were getting to him. And I feel like it would be so cool with like what the Asylum is trying to do of like kind of mess with his brain, essentially, for him to like show that a little bit more in his voice. I think they could have made that a little bit more of a dynamic progression as it went on. So yeah, that's like the one thing that I wish they did with it. But like, it's definitely not a bad portrayal. But also, speaking of, the way this game progresses and the way that his like psyche progresses, our whole video, like a full like hour long ish video, is about the horror of this game and all like the psychological implications of it, I guess. This is the thing that the game is like most praised for, and it's like talked about the most. It's like, the Batman Arkham Asylum has the best atmosphere, to the point that it's like gotten obnoxious for people to say. Do you think that the atmosphere like lived up to what you remembered, and do you think it's worth like the amount of praise that it gets?
Batman Arkham Asylum, is very strange, because it's, when you think of like a superhero game, you think, oh, open world. Like, if you're going to play as Batman, you're going to be able to explore a city, which they didn't do. And I find that very interesting with Arkham Asylum. It's like, no, this is a linear kind of like closed off game. Like, they want you to go a certain path. You can branch off and explore once you like unlock certain sections, but the designers were kind of able to give you more of a focused vision with the environment. The one thing that stood out with me in this game was the lighting, which is immaculate. Like, the trademark walkout moment where you walk out and you see the asylum like outside, you see this moon, this gigantic teal moon with like these orange accents like lining the walls of like the mansion. If this game has so much sauce in the lighting department, it is wonderful. It's also complemented by the architecture of the asylum, like, from the mansion to the penitentiary to the botanical gardens. Like, there's like different distinct styles. The botanical gardens is my favorite. Like, I absolutely love the way that building looks. And in many ways, yeah, they kind of didn't replicate the kind of like look and like more like comical like feel and the atmosphere of the game. I feel like Night got pretty close, because Night has a very distinct look of Gotham City that I personally really, really, really love. Like, there's many iconic buildings in Arkham Knight, but juxtaposed against Arkham Asylum, it certainly is more of like an immersive kind of streamlined atmospheric game and experience, and it really lends itself well being a linear game. Like, when you go to Croc's lair, there's like human skulls laid out where the workers would be. It's like, are these real human skulls? If you're working in the asylum, are you walking past like dead bones?
I talked about this a little bit in the video, because it's like there are skulls put like everywhere for no reason. There's like a skull in the ventilation shaft or something. It's like, why is that there? Who crawled in there?
There's a skull outside of the Batcave.
Yeah, like what? There's so many that like, when I was like talking about it and I was trying to figure out like, are these people being eaten by Croc? are the, like, why are there, like, skulls at the top of Dead Man's point? Like, when I was trying to figure this stuff out, I was trying to give a reasoning to a lot of it, but at the same time, I was like, dude, I think they just wanted to put a bunch of skulls everywhere. I think they were like, this game's spooky, let's just throw a bunch of, like, assets into there.
Being a worker in this workplace is incredible. It's already distressing enough, but being surrounded by dead bodies is, like, I don't know. Like, but I like what it implies, I guess, that, like, there's been so many, like, inmates that, like, tried escaping that, like, yeah, maybe there was an inmate that just got stuck in the ventilation shafts and just died up there, you know? Going back to the atmosphere of this game, yeah, it's kind of beaten to death. It's like, yeah, it's so atmospheric, it's so good, but it is. And it definitely deserves that in many ways. Like, it's generally great, but, like, we've seen, like, you know, much more, like, later contemporary games do that better than Arkham Asylum. But of course, Arkham Asylum was one of those games that really did it well. I know they were inspired a lot by BioShock, which BioShock is, of course, one of the most, like, detailed-oriented games of the time. And so for them to take inspiration off of BioShock and implement it into an Arkham Asylum was, like, that just seemed like a very natural progression, like a very natural evolution of environmental design. It's wonderful. And what really helps accentuate that are the riddles, I guess. The Riddler's, like, little puzzles where you have to go and analyze something. It really makes you pay attention to the environment more than you typically would. So you're kind of, like, looking at all these, like, intricate details. You're, like, looking at the lockers, you're looking at the floor, you're looking at the desk to see what's on there, and you notice some oddities on these locations, and sometimes they're not even related to the Riddler's, like, puzzle at all. They're just there. You know, there's, like, a sign in the elevator thing that just says, like, that mentions something that you have to be mad in order to work in a madhouse. And it's like, that has nothing to do with anything, and that's just here at this location. And that's very interesting that the devs just kind of put it there. So, yeah, it's immaculate. And it's something that kind of, like, is hard to replicate when you're trying to do an open world. You can't really pay that much more attention to, like, the closed nature of the environments.
It's really easy when you look at these games that are, like, considered atmospheric. Like, you look at BioShock, you look at Arkham Asylum, you look at Bloodborne, for example. It kind of seems like, does the word atmospheric for a gamer just mean, like, Victorian and, like, kind of dark? Like, is it like a super quick hack of just, like, oh, just put, like, a spike on that thing and now it's atmospheric all of a sudden? But I think that, like, all of those games, what they do well, and Asylum does this really well, is, like you said, like, it's in the details. There are statues that indirectly reference other statues, and if you know the story behind them, you're like, oh my god, they just kind of put that there, and, like, people were probably not going to make that connection, but it's there. And I don't even know if they did it on purpose, but they did such a good job setting it all up in a way that you can, like, look around and make your own conclusions off of it, that it kind of doesn't matter if they did it on purpose. Although the one thing I will say is that the whole, like, teal aesthetic of this game is cool, but it also makes certain areas look kind of washed out, and even Batman himself kind of washed out. And I noticed this a lot when I was, like, looking through, like, for images for thumbnails, actually. I was just like, man, that is not, like, OLED. Like, when you look at Arkham Knight, I don't know what they did, but black in Arkham Knight is, like, darker than black in real life. I don't know how they pulled that off, but it's just, like, the darkest substance I've ever seen in my life. And if they had that in this game and they, like, had that kind of technology, oh my god, I can't imagine how that would look. But we can get to that later. But the point is, I think, like, overall they do a really good job with the horror atmosphere, and I don't think it's, like, undeserving of that. Just because people, like, say it a lot, it's just like, it's still true.
Yeah, certainly. I think the washed out kind of look is very much a product of its time. That's just kind of how games were.
Yeah.
Like, dude.
Yeah.
This was the era of the brown piss filter, you know? Like, it kind of falls into that, but it just takes on more of, like, a blue-orange hue, as opposed to the god-awful green and brown. Which I still kind of love, by the way. It just kind of was, like, the nature of games at the time, where it's like we had, like, these shitty TVs, we had these consoles that, you know, rendered out to 720 max 1080p, and it's like, yeah, we couldn't get true blacks in there at all.
Yeah.
So the character design of this game ranges from exceptional to just downright awful. So I want you to give me some of your favorite and least favorite character designs in this game.
I think I'll start with, like, my least favorite design,
And I just think Victor Zsasz looks weird as hell in this game. Like, obviously there's like NPCs that look bad, like Aaron Cash looks bad, and I feel like he's important enough that he doesn't need to look bad. And then like the doctors who really don't matter enough look horrible.
Elderly babies like melted in plastic. It's really bad.
Dude, it's so bad. Like, honestly, thank God this game has like pre-rendered cutscenes, because like even though it's like, I think it's like locked at 720p, like thank God I don't have to look at the goofy ass character models like in the cutscenes where it's like all dark and spooky. It's just like, oh my God. But yeah, no, I think of like the main villains, I really don't like Zaz's character design. He looks really weird and flat. And I think some of it might have had to do with them trying to censor it for a T-rated game. I might be pulling this completely out of my ass, but I think Night is M-rated. I would have loved to see an M-rated version of Asylum, because I do think the character models had to be toned down for that. But yeah, he just looks flat. His scars look flat. His face is like weirdly shaped. I don't understand what's going on with him. Designs that I liked, I mean, I think the character model for Batman is solid. It's what you should expect. I guess it's so quintessential at this point that like I don't really think of it as like, do I like this or not? It's just like there. But I've never had like a problem with it. Same with Joker's design. It's not as fun and cool as like the super abstract stuff that's in the comic, but I think they did a good job with him. If there's one that like I feel like people don't talk about as much, but I like, it's Killer Croc, because I like how he's all teeth. I feel like that might be like a divisive one. I feel like some people might not like his character model all that much, but he seems like creepier than a lot of other versions I've seen, because like it's just so much of his face is taken up by just those jagged teeth.
Definitely better than the Suicide Squad movie. I'll give you that.
Yeah, like that he looks like a dinosaur or something in that one. Like it's really weird. Like he looks like the Thing from Fantastic Four. But yeah, no, I like Croc's character design. But what about you?
For me, I think the Joker, like this is quite possibly like the best looking Joker in like anything that I've seen, if I'm being entirely honest. Not in this game specifically. I think he looks fine in this game, but in City and Night specifically, I really like that rendition of the Joker. And this is kind of like a evolution of that. Like this is his where he's like kind of, you know, pristine in a way. Like his face is smooth, the like makeup is very clean in comparison, and you know, like we said before, Arkham Knight was like our first introduction to the Arkham games, and the Joker looks so decrepit and nasty and like he's like rotting, which is I love that about that specific character design. So seeing kind of like an earlier version of that is really interesting. So he looks great, and Batman looks great too, as we said before. I really think that the Scarecrow design is also cool, but it's also bad.
Yeah, I had a hard time placing Scarecrow also.
It's cool because I like the mask a lot, and I love the Freddy Krueger claw. That is such an awesome like adaptation of the fear toxin, like having him and this is something they did better in Night. Like him kind of having like the sewn like cloth on his face. Like Scarecrow looks so cool in Arkham Knight, and the claw does so much does wonders for that design. But it's kind of just, I guess, like, in hindsight, looking back at Arkham Asylum, Scarecrow, it's like, that's cool. I know they can do better, though. In terms of least favorite character designs, I got two really bad ones. For one, Jim Gordon just looks awful. He's just, like, the most boring, like, god-awful design of Jim Gordon.
I can't even picture him in my head right now. That's how little I think about the Jim Gordon character design in this game.
And the second one is the Harley design. I think this is a really bad rendition of Harley Quinn, like aesthetically. I think the character performance is wonderful, but you kind of touched on this. You have an Arkham Origins video, which is really great. Check that out, by the way. Where you gotta go into like how horny the Rockstar Rocksteady developers were when it came to designing the female characters of this series, and that's just, you just see that like Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, they're meant to be, you know, sexual characters in a way. I guess Harley Quinn a little less so, Poison Ivy most definitely. So it's like, you know, of course it makes sense that she would Winnie the Pooh it, you know, and kind of just have like the the thong and the top, but like the jiggle physics the just god awful hair and like makeup design of Harley just is really not great. And they did so much better in City, and they did so much better in Night. Like, those are really great renditions of Harley.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna include Harley Quinn on mine because I had a feeling that you were gonna mention her somewhere in your list. That's so funny that you bring up the Arkham Origins video. I don't even remember what I said in that video. It was a while back. So like,
you said in that video that you like Origins better than Asylum. Do you still stand by that statement?
That's crazy for you to bring up right now, dude. I have to defend myself. Oh, shit. Okay. For a long time, I couldn't get back into Asylum. And I said in my video, like, at the end, I was like, I have a newfound respect for it because I'm seeing, like, all the layers that went into it. And like, absolutely, it's, like, it's more original. It's more, like, I love the source material more. I love the secrets more. It just felt more fresh when it came out. But when it comes to, like, which one I would rather play, I feel like I would just go and play Origins.
Yeah,
like, if I had to choose
totally agree, dude.
and Origins is a good game. Like, people act like it's, like, a horrible... It's really good. People are mad that it wasn't made by Rocksteady and that, like, the what was it, Black Mask? It turns out to be Joker.
I forgot about
that.
So holy shit.
Yeah, people are like, oh, man, like, it's Joker again. It's like, yeah, that's kind of annoying. But, like, I don't know, man. I like Origins. We're going to get to Origins at some point. But to talk about what you were saying with Harley, I definitely think that, like, my biggest problem with her character is I'm honestly fine if that's a horny-ass rendition of Harley. Like, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But what confuses me is, like, I can't figure out her, like, age. Like, she has the face of, like, a 40-something-year-old woman and then, like, the hair and demeanor of, like, a 16-year-old girl. And I'm like, I don't know what's happened. And then she's dressed, like, in between there somewhere. Yeah, she's just got, like, a weird, like, Frankenstein-together design. I feel like somewhere along that process, like, you can see in the concept art, she has, like, a bit more of a playful look to her and, like, attitude to her. And then eventually they kind of made her, like, maybe a little darker and, like, more serious. And at some point along the way, it got, like, lost in translation, and she ended up with this weird, like, Frankenstein concept. I don't know how much you've looked into the concept art, but there are definitely certain designs that I feel like I prefer what they were looking like in the concept than what they did eventually, and that's always going to happen. But what's, like, at least just one character that you're like, I wish they had kept more of that design?
Yeah, no, I genuinely think it'd be Harley, because I think the Jester suit works, like, so much better than the whatever they went with, in this game. It would have even been, like, a natural evolution going into City and Night, where she kind of takes on, like, the red and black kind of look in those games, where in this one she has, like, kind of like a dark blue, white, and red color palette in this. I feel like it would have been great if they had the Jester suit in this one. So, like, yeah, that's kind of the one that, like, really stuck out to me. I didn't really pay attention other than the Harley, I guess. Poison Ivy has a pretty good design as well in the concept art, and Zaz certainly looks much better in... All these characters look much better in the concept art than they actually do in, like, the 3D realm,
I'll point out one that I really wish that they had kept, and this should probably, like, lead into something you wanted to talk about, which is originally the design of the venomed up Joker was supposed to be a lot more, like, spinely. Like, he was almost supposed to look... From the description of it, it seemed like he was supposed to be more like a splicer type, crawling on the walls, and, like, he had this weird lanky build to him. And if you look at the concept for, like, what Venom Joker was supposed to be, he's, like, a lot more of, like, a feral creature.
That suits him
and I think that would have been so
much better.
Cool. Like, the big buff, like, Bane Joker is so weird.
So, yeah, I guess on the topic of Bane and souped up supervillains, this game houses a series of boss fights with, like, Batman's iconic rogues gallery. What are some of your favorite and least favorite boss fights in this game? I know for me personally, I do like Bane's fight in this game. It was the hardest point of the game for me. I couldn't nail it for some reason, and playing on hard mode, it was such a shock to me, like, fighting Bane. I don't know why I just couldn't get to him. It's a good fight altogether, though, but, like, Arkham Origins does a much better Bane fight from what I remember. And in terms of least favorite, Poison Ivy fight kind of stinks, in my opinion. Also, that last boss fight stinks. We'll get into it.
Yeah, I think that's like, there's no boss fight in this game that I'm like, you know what, sick ass boss fight. There's some that I'm like, okay, you know what, that's fine. The Bane fight is fine. It's like inoffensive, I guess. But there's none that I'm like, oh yeah, I enjoyed that part. Like I'm excited for this boss fight if I replay the game. I agree with you on Ivy's fight. I think people point to the final boss as the worst boss fight in the game, but I think at the very least it's like really easy, and it just like kind of, and it's like super anticlimactic, and it's not good, but it's not like it. Like the Ivy fight is just frustrating and long. It goes on way too long, and you're just doing the same thing over and over, and you're kind of expecting something new to happen. And like at the most, what it does is like it introduces some random enemy. I hate just like when boss fights have just a bunch of ads, which for the people who don't know, it's just like additional enemies that are coming in to like distract you from what the boss is doing. To me, that's just like you didn't have enough to actually create a dynamic boss fight that would engage players, and so you're distracting them from the fact that you don't have a fully fleshed out boss fight by throwing like 30 other people in there. And this game does that a lot. If there was one that I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool, this is kind of like different, Crocs is like not exactly a boss fight, it's more of like a fancy escape sequence. I would say that one's like, it's probably the one that I respect the most, being like a little more in the vein of like what the rest of the game is doing. It's really showing off like these villains in their natural habitat. So to put you in that like escape sequence with Croc, I think is like a good way of playing off that. And I don't think a lot of the other bosses do that.
No, they definitely leave a lot to be desired. And like I 110% see what you mean with the additional goons that they kind of just throw at you. That was the thing that really bothered me with Bane's fight. Even though I still liked it, even though it just felt so like gratifying finally beating that. Like I had that moment, I'm like, yes, finally, you know. And it's like that's how you know you get a good boss fight. Is like when you're not so overly frustrated, but you still feel fulfilled after defeating them. But yeah, no, those constant bombardment by the enemies, very lazy in hindsight. But the Croc fight is, which I guess it's not really a fight, but like the Killer Croc sequence is great too, and it's one of the like scariest kind of moments in the game too. Like it's really tense the entire time that you're going through it. I think that they did that section wonderfully, even though it is kind of the reoccurring thing with these bosses, and like you even kind of see this with like the Scarecrow sections, is that these villains are so fucking stupid. It is hilarious. Like, just Poison Ivy, like, casually, like, opening herself up just to get hit with a batarang within, like, less than a second, you know?
Like, why? Why is that, like, she...
You got hit with a batarang like, 15 times before this. Like, don't you learn? It's, like, obviously, like, boss fights are just patterns and, like, identifying patterns. But, like, they could have been more complex and they could have been more dynamic, but I feel like maybe that was just kind of something they ran into with, like, you know, budgetary constrictions, where it's just like, we would love to do more with this, but we kind of just can't, so we'll just throw some guys at you, you know? They definitely improved upon that within the later entries.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the later entries, there's like, villains that are in those games that don't show up here, and there's villains that never end up in, like, any of these games, really. But because Arkham Asylum is such a psychologically horror-inspired title, are there any villains that, like, you wish they had managed to implement into this that just, like, never showed up?
So they reference villains all the time. You know, it's constantly tied into a lot of the riddles that you go through, the secrets of the asylum. But the one villain that is, like, noticeably absent from this game is, of course, the Mad Hatter. Like, you're in a madhouse, you know, and the Mad Hatter is not there. Like, he's referenced, of course, and, you know, he is seen within Arkham Origins, but I always found that very strange, and upon, like, researching the game, apparently there was supposed to be a Mad Hatter section of the game that they just kind of cut out because it kind of got in the way. But I think it would have been cool if they implemented, like, the Mad Hatter in this game. It could have kind of been, like, another pseudo trippy kind of like Scarecrow segment where it's like he kind of throws you into this mad world, but I kind of understand why they didn't put it in. The game's already so short and like compact and like tight that like, yeah, adding anything else I feel like could be beneficial, but also could have detracted from the experience, because what I really liked about the game was how short it was. Just kind of like how streamlined the entire experience was, and it didn't overstay its welcome at all.
Yeah, I mean, Mad Hatter is like the easiest answer because they also wanted to do that, and he's also in the comic, and he's like Alice in Wonderland is a big inspiration for the comic. It would have made a lot of sense, but I think also he like does step on the toes of Scarecrow. Like you mentioned that a lot of his sequences would probably be very similar to Scarecrow, but Scarecrow makes more sense to like show up at random intervals and like, you know, he's the embodiment of fear, versus Mad Hatter is like more of an insular idea that would probably be off somewhere else. So just for what they were trying to do with this game, I think Scarecrow makes more sense. But it does suck that he just never shows up. Professor Pig is another one who shows up in like the other games. That would have made so much sense here. If you like, there are references to like the lunatics being lobotomized and experimented on. And like that's a lot of the stuff that Professor Pig does in like the later games, and so there could have definitely been some reference there. But in terms of the ones that like never actually show up in any of the games, for them to have had Scarface, the little like puppet, in like a few brief sections of the game, it shows up in like the Scarecrow nightmare, he shows up at Joker's side at the end, but then for them to not have the ventriloquist character, like he like in the lore he like escaped at some point, I think from Blackgate or something like that. It feels like there should be something more with him. I feel like they wanted to do more with that. He's a really like under discussed character, so maybe they've like never said it publicly, but I feel like they always had plans for him to have like at least a little bit more of an impact. And it's weird to me that they like, I think he gets referenced again, like the dummy gets referenced again in the later games, but then they never show like the ventriloquist and dummy.
That's really interesting because like I vaguely know of the ventriloquist, and like when I was playing the game and I saw the puppet, I was kind of just like, don't know what that is, and I just kind of like moved on and like totally erased it. But like now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah, why did they just kind of tease that and then like nothing came of it? It's a little undisturbed. Of course, there's iconic Batman villains that don't make the appearance, but like are teased, like Two-Face, the Penguin, and Mr. Freeze. But they get their limelight within the later entries.
Yeah.
Speaking of villains and going back to the Scarecrow sections of this game are absolutely iconic. Like really wonderfully done. The subtle nods that kind of guide you along this distorted reality is really well executed. How like, you know, the first sequence you're in the mortuary and like the voices in like the atmosphere are telling you kind of where to go. They're like telling you to leave. So you're like, okay, I explored this area. You leave and then it loops and it's like, whoa, that's cool. It really allows the player to kind of like experience the surrealism of like the toxin. Especially like when it plays with the idea of it being a video game, which, you know, is one of the most iconic moments of this game, when the game glitches out and then it restarts with the like whole twisted reality, and then, you know, the Joker shoots you. It's a game over screen. It's really awesome, really creative, thinks outside the box. It's something I kind of wish they leaned more into with the later entries. On top of that, you also have the Scarecrow levels. How well did the Scarecrow segments age for you?
First of all, I think you mentioned the Scarecrow's design earlier, and I think he suits that better, like when he's like a huge guy, but like when he's like standing in front of you with his little stereo speakers in his mouth, he looks kind of goofy. I feel like because I knew the crash was coming, everyone knows about the crash, and then like I knew the morgue scene was coming, it lost its muster at this point. But thinking back on like how it felt when I was first playing it, those are really like impactful scenes. And for the actual sequences where you're in that like weird realm, Scarecrow realm, definitely looks great. I'm a sucker for anything that's crumbling. And like crumbling Farum Azula is my favorite location in Elden Ring. It's like so sick, dude. But yeah, no, I love the like design of it. But playing through it, it's like 3 or 4 sequences that like nothing new really happens. You're just doing the same thing. You're hiding, you're moving. You're hiding, you're moving. At one point you get to like pull something down so you can move and hide to it. It's not the most engaging like gameplay experience, but just the design of all of it I think has aged pretty well, even though it's not like as, you know, technologically sound as like a more recent game.
It's definitely a representation of like how Batman like kind of is overcoming the fear toxin. And it's like, how do you gamify that? And it's like, okay, I guess we'll just play a game of hide and seek. where Scarecrow is just so oblivious to anything that is happening around him. You know, it kind of goes back into like what I was saying with these villains. They're so stupid in these gameplay segments. And yeah, Scarecrow definitely. He's not an exception, tell you that. As I kind of like explained before, though Batman belongs in an open world setting, there is something very like tantalizing about like the tight section design of the island. That is very rewarding to explore and is very interesting and kind of like not what you would expect out of like a Batman experience. Do you feel like there is room for another linear Batman game like this to exist again, or is it kind of like, I feel like once you go open world, you don't go back, you know?
Genuinely, like my answer is no. I don't think it goes back to like this level of linearity, because I just think AAA games have abandoned this level of linearity. Like, you know, like obviously Asylum it takes some influence from Metroidvanias. You like backtrack, going through the same locations, and then if you take something similar from like more recent times, like the Jedi games, they're considered linear with Metroidvania elements, but you're going across like multiple planets to do it, right? Like it's a huge open space where you're doing it, right? Even like super linear games historically, like Uncharted, like became semi-open worlds, like semi-open sections. Sorry, not semi-open worlds. Things just expanded outwards a lot more to the point where if you're going through a bunch of hallways and like that's your pitch for your game, it's like you're mainly going to be going through hallways, and then you're going to step out for a second so you can go into another building right beside you that is also just hallways. Like that's hard to pitch to executives, I feel like. And that's, I think, the case with like most games. I think there's room for some superhero games to maybe play with this idea, like maybe a more linear Daredevil game would be like, I would go crazy for that. If Slow Clap specifically made a Daredevil game and it was like just going through a bunch of hallways beating people up, dude, sign me up. But yeah, I think it's not even just a Batman thing. I think just like, and you can see this as like a pessimistic view of like, oh man, this game's so great and like a game like this could never come out today. But I think we would just end up with like a new approach to making a Batman game. I don't think it has to be open world. I just don't think it'll end up like this.
If they wanted to do kind of like an Arkham Asylum exploration segment like this again, it would have to be within like a pre-established open world. I feel like from here you can only make linear sections of, I guess, the story in an open world Batman game, and that is a testament to just kind of how the games industry has evolved to where, yeah, linear games like this don't exist anymore. And if they do, they don't exist within big budget AAA kind of licensed releases, which is unfortunate, because I really loved how long the game was. I really appreciate how it respected my time, and it's kind of like a lost art form in a way. Is like designing a game that only lasts 9 to 12 hours, and that's it. It's very rewarding.
Also, speaking of, you know, how linear this game is, how detail oriented it is, like we talked about, like how many little references they put in places, or you can just pick up on, and it doesn't necessarily draw your attention to it, but you're able to find it. One of the issues that I had was that a lot of this game conditioned me to use detective mode all the time to like find people, obviously, but then also like it's like, hey, track this guy's breath, and it's like, okay, well, I have to just like be in my detective mode and walk throughout the entire asylum with this like shitty blue filter on the entire time. Do you feel like you overused detective mode? Do you feel like it kind of messed with some of the things that they were trying to, you know, portray with this game, kind of ruined the atmosphere that we talked about earlier?
I abused the shit out of detective mode when I first played these games. It's like, why wouldn't you? It's like, it's there for you. It puts the game in easy mode. You need it for stealth sections. So it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you use it? But at the same time, like in hindsight, it's like, yeah, it kind of is not as rewarding as like just, you know, raw dogging it and just, you know, looking with your bare eyes. So when like this latest playthrough of Arkham Asylum, I kind of was more mindful of not using detective mode as much as I used to. But of course, with that, you know, there's always that lingering, like with just a press of a button, I could see everyone in this room right now. And it's like, that kind of got to me at some points. I didn't feel too bad about it. I think it kind of does make sense for Batman to have a detective vision, you know, mode. Like, it makes sense within the confines of the world. That he would have this, and it's an interesting gameplay mechanic, but it definitely puts an ugly filter on what is ostensibly a beautiful game. So while we don't know how much this game actually costs to make, you can definitely feel the budget allocation throughout. From the in-game dialogue spoken by those freakish-looking NPCs that we mentioned before, to the compressed audio that kind of sounds like it was recorded on the first ever microphone, there's a lot of ugly in this game. Like, the Scarecrow voice modulation, the Poison Ivy voice modulation is really, really bad. Though I find it charming, personally, I can't help but wonder what this game would look like, sound like, and even play like if it was given the proper remake treatment of the modern games industry. So how likely do you think it is for a remake of Arkham Asylum to happen? And would you even want a remake in the first place?
Likelihood wise, I mean, like, honestly, any game that did decently well, like, you can bet on there probably being a remake at some point. They've already remastered it, and City, from what I remember, it wasn't a very good remaster, but they did do it. I think the issue that I have with a remake of this game is there are two remakes. There are remakes that are like exceptionally faithful. They redo the assets, they like change, maybe they make it darker, and people are going to be like, I liked it when it was teal, and it's like, okay, sure, whatever, man. But like they'll basically just like bring everything to a higher level, but they'll maybe use the same voice lines, or they'll re-record the same voice lines, and the story plays out the exact same way, right? And I think if you do that, you don't address some of the bigger problems with this game, which are like the ending and like the boss fights. You definitely miss out on stuff like that, and it just becomes like a facelift to this game that was like, it doesn't like look bad or like complete like unplayable by any stretch. And then there's the other kind of remake, which is like the Final Fantasy VII type remake, where they really start altering things, and things play a little differently, and events happen differently, and the ending kind of changes. And it's like, that's appealing in one way because you can actually go in and fix some of the things that like this game struggled with. But then how likely are you to actually capture the reason why I like this game to begin with? And especially with like Final Fantasy VII, like it changed, you know, it went from 2D text on screen to like a full 3D action RPG. You wouldn't really make as big of a change with Arkham Asylum. So I feel like it's possible. It might even be probable. Like they're probably gonna want they're gonna want to squeeze money out of this somehow. But I wouldn't be. I would be like I would be excited for it. I would want to play like a better version of this game. But I don't think it would change too much about like my opinion on it.
You put a new coat of paint on the game and, you know, touch up the gameplay to kind of make it more akin to the likes of Night, you know, bare minimum City or Origins. I think it would kind of really rectify a lot of the problems with the game, and it would in many ways be a way better game than it already is. Is it redundant? Yeah. Does it need to happen? No. Would I like to see it happen? Part of me kind of wishes. Yeah. So I don't know if they could do a Last of Us Part 1 kind of like treatment and like just remaster a game that, I mean, to remake a game that really doesn't need it, but I'll still take it. And you know what? I think they could just make the quintessential Arkham Asylum experience through that, and that would be really cool for me.
I have one more question for you on my end. I think you have one more as well. So you handled a lot of the Amadeus Arkham... You handled the whole Amadeus Arkham section, actually, in the other video. And this was something that I actually missed a lot of when I was playing back in the day, because I wouldn't look for, like, every single secret. And some of these are, like, pretty hidden in there. First of all, what are your thoughts on that plotline? Not just narrating it, but, like, just giving your overall thoughts on it. But also, like, do you feel like this story would have been better if more attention had been drawn to it and it wasn't, like, this really deep secret that most players wouldn't actually find? Because it ends up bringing out so much of the setting and, like, elevating that setting to such a high degree.
Yeah. I think in premise, it's really cool. This kind of, like, ethereal ghost haunting Arkham Asylum kind of fits within the aesthetic of it. You know, it's very gothic and it's very kind of mystical to begin with. So why wouldn't the, you know, in this fantastical world, why wouldn't the spirit of the creator of the asylum kind of haunt the halls and kind of be apparent? It's a very interesting... In execution, it's a little, I don't know, half-baked in a sense. I really like the idea of finding these little like pieces and uncovering the story, and then the more you learn about it, the more you realize, oh, this is not Amadeus Arkham, this is Quincy Sharp, who you kind of know based on the voice because it's voiced by Tom Kane, and it's like he has such a recognizable and distinct voice that it's like, oh, does every single warden of Arkham Asylum just have the same fucking voice? And it's like, whatever. It's really cool, but the more you look into it, the more nonsensical it becomes, and it kind of goes into Arkham City, and it goes into the League of Assassins and Ra's al Ghul, and it's very strange. Like I had to kind of just word vomit it out to fully understand what the main overarching story was trying to do.
It definitely gets a little bit messier in the game, where I also wasn't sure when he was talking about the past and when it turned into Quincy Sharp, and I'm like, this is cool, but I kind of don't know what's happening.
Yeah, no, it's what I wrote down was, okay, so Quincy Sharp was convinced to restart Arkham Asylum by the League of Assassins with the promise that he would become mayor of Gotham City. Ra's al Ghul set this in motion because he wants to start Wonder City, which is essentially Gotham, devoid of its depravity, whatever the fuck that means. Arkham was meant to be a place where criminals go to be executed. While this is happening, Ra's al Ghul is resurrected and the events of Arkham City take place. Quincy Sharp starts to read the journal entries of Amadeus Arkham, and apparently he's crazy too, so he starts slowly thinking that he's the reincarnation of Arkham, but he's pathetic and he has a hard time actually committing to killing any of his patients. His fragile mental state kind of leads to his fall, and you see that in Arkham City. It's there's so much nuance there. And it's did the warden really need to also be he could have just been a corrupt politician, you know? It's cool having the warden be also criminally insane at the same time. It kind of goes into well, who is he to say who should live, who should die, and it goes into the origin story of Amadeus Arkham, and the actual story of Amadeus Arkham is very well written. It's very interesting and really sad and depraved and very not Batman-like in a sense, to where this is actually just a really haunting story. So for them to kind of I guess they did bastardize it in a way, but they also took their own spin on it, which is appreciated at the same time. I think it could have been done better, but at the same time, not a lot of people paid attention to it, and it also kind of added some mysticism to the series that a lot of people weren't so, I guess, didn't really know was there with Batman, only for it to kind of just, erode away as soon as you actually figure out the mystery. All right, so yeah, as of the recording of this video, there's one confirmed Arkham game known as Batman Arkham Shadow. It's actually releasing here very, very soon. As of the recording of this video, it will be out by the time you are watching this video. Yay for you. It is the second VR entry in the Arkham series, set between Origins and Asylum, and it's for the MetaQuest 3. It looks absolutely wonderful. I really want to get it, but I don't have a MetaQuest 3. There are also rumblings of a new Batman game from Rocksteady, but nothing is confirmed on that front. I want to know, Assad, what is the future of Batman games in your opinion? What is your dream Batman game from here on out?
That's a good question, and I do definitely want to check out the VR game. It is really inaccessible to try and get. Obviously, you could see it as just a regular piece of software, there are PS5 exclusives and stuff like that, but it makes a lot more sense for me to have a PS5 in my house, and I feel to get the MetaQuest 3 for this, it feels like I'm specifically getting it for this game, and that's a tough decision to make. But it looks really good, so I'm having a hard time with it. If I'm being honest, my ideal Batman game might have already been made, and it's Arkham Knight. And I know that a lot of people have issues with Arkham Knight, but I love that game so much. So I'm more thinking what I want to see next from this series. And I think I want to see something completely different. I want to see I don't want to see the free flow combat system. I don't want to see this emphasis on the ideas of fear. It's obviously that stuff's important to Batman in general, but to have this much of a focus on it, for it to be the main theme of the series, you can take a step back from that. There were elements of Gotham Knights that could have been kind of cool. I really don't like Gotham Knights as a game. I'll defend Batman Arkham Origins as much as I can, but Gotham Knights is not good. Gotham Knights is somehow from the same developers of Arkham Origins, and insanely worse in like almost every single way, including the gliding, which is weird. That's a whole other. The point is, I think I want them to take a different direction, and I think the most fun part of that for me would be like just not knowing what it is. I don't know if I want to see like maybe a bit more lighthearted tone. I don't know if I want to see like something that is even more, emotionally driven. Roger Craig Smith, I would assume, would be the voice of Batman for a lot of the future games. So he brings a lot more raw emotion to the role than Kevin Conroy. And I feel like you have to play into that. Like, Origin's version of Batman was a lot more emotional, and he was younger, but So I think you have to like play to the strengths of what you have now and where you go in the future. I really don't think that they should backtrack and try and make something that's like that fits into this series. I don't want the next game to also be named Arkham something. I want it to be named something completely different.
I am also of the same mind. I think Arkham Knight kind of perfected the modern Batman formula, and there's really nothing. There are issues with the Batmobile sections. Definitely leave a lot to be desired. Even though I kind of also don't mind them as well, but they did it with this trilogy: Arkham Asylum, City, and Knight. That's, as well as Origins. Let's not forget about Origins. They did it. Like, those are the Batman experiences. And so from moving on from here, it's very, especially with the ending of Knight being so finalized, it's kind of like, you really don't need to make more Batman games. But, of course, it's Batman, and video games are constantly evolving, so it's like, what do you do? And for me, personally, it's not Gotham Knights. It's not Suicide Squad. I felt like naturally the kind of Arkham universe should have like branched out to other superheroes. I know there was like talks of a Superman game, but like that's how do you make a good Superman game that's still like has yet to be done. Me personally, I feel like a Flash video game would be so cool. I love the Flash. I feel like that.
I've been thinking about actually making a video about like why there hasn't been a Flash game yet, because there's reasons for it. There's test footage for like I think like in 2008 they were trying to make one.
It is a tough thing to tackle, but I feel like with like the right tools and like with the right developers, you could make something really special with that character. But of course, that hasn't been seen. But in terms of Batman, there's two things that I think could work wonderfully. And they're both based on canceled Batman projects that we've already seen. One of them is Gotham by Gaslight, which I think would have been an awesome Batman game and like an awesome, like refreshing take on the Batman formula. Batman is so techy, he's so tech oriented, and so stripping him of that and like putting him in like a gothic Gotham City, lit by gaslight would be fucking sick. Would be so cool. I really want to see that made.
Yeah.
And like it really lends itself well to the Batman formula. And the alternative direction they could go in, instead of going to the past, could look towards the future. Batman Beyond is so cool. It's so awesome. There were talks of a Batman Beyond game from Rocksteady, possibly with Damian Wayne taking on the mantle, which I kind of prefer to be Terry McGinnis.
I don't love Damian Wayne either.
Yeah. That's another refreshing take as well. It's like, okay, so we're going to put him in Neo Gotham City, and with games like Cyberpunk, we can see like what a cyberpunk like city can look in the modern day, and put Batman in there, dude, with like the fucking rocket boots, with all these other gadgets, with that really, like, there's something to be done there with both of those renditions of Batman. That it's like, you don't make another Batman game set in modern Gotham with the generic vanilla Batman formula. Do a different take, whether it's Gotham by Gaslight, whether it's Batman Beyond, or whether it's just another superhero entirely. That's what I would personally want to see from future games, future Rocksteady games. But of course, they tried branching out with Suicide Squad, and wasn't the best. And that team is not the same team that made Asylum, that made City, that made Knight. So this new Batman game that they're working on is definitely we'll keep an eye on it for sure, but don't expect another Arkham Knight. That's certainly. Yeah, so that's all I got for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we close?
I feel like we got through most of it. We probably got through more of it than we needed to. we really dove into this. Honestly, this was a lot of fun. I think this is more fun than just like doing a regular review of the game. Like we I'm sure you did as well, but I really had to get into the weeds of it to like make the video that I made on it specifically. Also, if this is the first of the 2 videos that you're watching, go check it out. Like I don't know how you would have gotten this far watching this one first, but like, hey man, go check out that other video.
I mean, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it for me. I mean, you wanna sign up? Oh, also, Landen has his own channel.
Yeah, I make video essays about games and stuff. 2 most notable games, probably Red Dead Redemption and Fallout. I make videos on like kind of supernatural horror aspects of those games. Yeah, check it out. I'm sure we probably plugged that in the beginning as well. With your little introduction. For me, other than that, I have one more thought. That last boss fight sucks. Joker does not need to be souped up. I totally forgot to mention that. Move past that though. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was genuinely really fun. Thank you for letting me kind of spitball towards you.
Of course. Hope you guys enjoyed.
Take care, guys.
See you next time. Say bye to his cat. What's your cat's name? I don't even know your cat's name.
Sadie Adler.